Toprak Razgatlıoğlu didn't just step into MotoGP, he stepped into a machine that refuses to bend for anyone, a world where instinct becomes liability and brilliance becomes burden. One of the greatest brakemen of his generation now faces a future where the very skill that made him unstoppable could destroy him in a heartbeat. The Yamaha V4 jolts under his fingertips like an animal that doesn't yet trust its rider, the Michelin front whispering warnings he isn't accustomed to hearing. Every lap tells him he has arrived at the wrong time, on the wrong bike, in the wrong chapter, yet somehow at the only moment destiny would have allowed. The paddock watches in quiet fascination as he tries to erase a decade of muscle memory while carrying a nation's belief on his shoulders. They see a champion forced to dismantle his own greatness before he can rebuild it for a universe engineered to punish hesitation as brutally as it punishes pride. But beneath the uncertainty lies a twist only insiders dare mention. The future is shifting toward him, inch by inch, tire by tire, rule by rule. And buried deep inside the chaos is one question no expert can answer. One question that keeps the entire MotoGP world awake. What happens when you take a rider built for another world, and the world suddenly transforms to fit him? Toprak Razgatlıoğlu arrives in MotoGP like a comet entering a storm, a three-time WSBK champion whose name carries the weight of once-in-a-lifetime braking ability, yet whose debut unfolds under skies darkened by Yamaha's collapse. He steps into the paddock with the quiet certainty of a man used to shaping races with his fingertips, but the silence around him murmurs statistics that sting. Is this really the moment fate chooses for me to start over? He wonders, feeling the cold bite of uncertainty in a world that forgives nothing. Reporters call his fan base unlike anything Yamaha has had since Valentino Rossi's prime, yet even that roar seems muted against the blunt reality that Yamaha ended 2025 as the worst constructor on the grid. The paddock whispers about Pramac, too, once Ducati's jewel and now a fallen empire that finished last in the team standings with just 125 points. Engineers brief him with soft voices, explaining that the M1's new V4 has a peculiar crankshaft vibration at mid-corner load that no one fully understands yet. He listens, nodding, absorbing each word as if they were clues in a mystery he didn't ask to solve. The fluorescent lights of the garage paint his face in a harsh glow that makes him look both older and hungrier. This project needs belief before it needs victories, a Yamaha technician mutters, more to himself than to the rider, who now carries the hopes of a rebuilding factory. Toprak breathes in the mix of fuel and fear, sensing that history can be both an anchor and a set of wings. He moves through the garage with the calm of a magician preparing a trick he hasn't yet mastered. The air feels heavy, like a theater moments before the curtain rises on an uncertain act. Cameras follow him, hoping to capture the instant greatness meets vulnerability. He stretches his gloves, feeling the leather tighten like a promise he cannot yet keep. Outside, fans chant his name with the devotion of pilgrims awaiting a miracle. Inside, mechanics tighten bolts with a precision that borders on prayer. I will make this bike listen to me, he thinks, clinging to that vow like a lifeline. Yamaha gives him a machine still searching for its own identity, fragile as a glass bridge suspended over fog. Journalists sense the contradiction, the epic arrival mixed with an almost tragic backdrop. Yet, amid all the tension, Toprak lifts his chin and walks toward his bike with the serene defiance of a man stepping into a story written in fire. And in that moment, the chaos feels like destiny sharpening its edges, preparing him for the first chapter of a journey that begins not in triumph, but in darkness, because some legends are born where glory refuses to shine. The first laps at Valencia hit Toprak like a cold slap, a sudden reminder that MotoGP is a language spoken in decimals, not instinct. And his body felt every unfamiliar syllable of it. He squeezed the brakes at the marker he knew by heart from WSBK, only to feel the bike shiver beneath him in a way that made his pulse spike. This isn't my world yet, he thought, swallowing the discomfort of a man who has rarely questioned his own touch. Pramac boss Gino Borsoy watched closely and later admitted that Toprak's ultra-late braking simply could not be replicated, a phrase that spread through the paddock like a verdict. The Michelin front tire is not a Pirelli, Borsoy added, and the words echoed against the garage walls with a quiet brutality. The difference mattered because Michelin's carcass stiffening at peak load reacted faster than steel nerves could compensate for. The carbon brake discs behaved nothing like the steel discs he mastered, the engineers explained while pointing to temperature graphs that rose and fell with unnerving volatility. Each run revealed a new quirk, a micro delay in initial bite, a sharper drop-off under trail braking, a front-end pulse that felt like the bike whispering a warning. Toprak sat on the pit wall, replaying every mistake in slow motion inside his head. Yamaha need to help Razgatlıoğlu understand the Michelin rubber before 2027, Jorge Lorenzo pronounced, clinical and unfiltered. That line struck him harder than any tank slapper could, because it reduced his art to a learning curve with no shortcuts. He tightened his gloves again, feeling the leather cling like doubt. The garage smelled of hot carbon and frustration, a scent that clung to him long after he removed his helmet. Mechanics stared at datasheets that looked like tangled constellations, searching for a meaning that refused to settle. I must become lighter on the lever, he told himself, sensing the truth sting deeper than pride. The sunset outside the circuit cast long shadows across the asphalt, stretching like unanswered questions. Engineers whispered about pressure windows so narrow they behaved like the fragile edge of a violin string. Toprak exhaled slowly, realizing that talent alone wouldn't bend this machine to his will. The day ended not with triumph, but with the unsettling clarity that MotoGP would not let him be who he was. And as he walked out of the garage, he felt the weight of a new reality pressing on his shoulders, sharpening itself into a single, unforgiving thought: change or be broken. Gigi Dal Igna found Toprak in a quiet corner of the garage, the fluorescent lights humming above them like nervous witnesses, and the Italian's voice carried the weight of someone who has seen champions rise and crumble. He leaned in and said, "You have to stay calm, but a rider is a rider. They want the results as soon as possible." A sentence that cut through the air with surgical precision. Toprak nodded, though inside he whispered, "How do I slow down the fire that built me?" His gloves were still warm from the previous run, the heat trapped inside them like a reminder of how close he had come to pushing beyond the limits. Gigi continued with a tone more anatomical than motivational. "You just need more kilometers on the bike," because to him, adaptation was math, not magic. The Ducati mastermind pointed to a telemetry trace where Toprak's initial brake pressure spike resembled a mountain peak. Too abrupt, too early, too dangerous. Engineers later mentioned a little-known detail. Yamaha's V4 prototype produced a brief surge of engine braking torque at lean angles that could unsettle even the most delicate wrists. The Turkish rider swallowed the information like a difficult truth, feeling its weight settle beneath his sternum. Outside the garage, the track smelled of burning rubber and unspoken rivalry. For sure, the riders are tight. There are some really good points opportunities, Gigi added, yet it sounded less like hope and more like a warning about the merciless closeness of MotoGP grids. Toprak's mind drifted to the sensation of the bike twisting beneath him earlier, a serpent testing whether he deserved to stay balanced on its back. "I must learn its rhythm before it decides to throw me," he thought, exhaling slowly. The paddock around them buzzed with the restless energy of teams chasing perfection by the millisecond. Gigi's gaze held firm, as if trying to anchor him to a reality harsher than any headline. The words pierced deeper because they came from a man who had built champions from spreadsheets and sleepless nights. Toprak flexed his fingers, imagining them becoming softer, more patient, more precise. The scene felt like a mentor handing a fragile compass to a traveler about to enter fog. A technician rolled by with a carbon disc glowing, like a miniature sun, reminding him that speed in this world was always flirting with danger. "Rebuild from zero," he repeated internally, tasting the bitterness of humility. The conversation ended quietly, but its echo lingered with the weight of prophecy. And, as Toprak walked back toward his bike, he understood that MotoGP was not asking him to be brilliant. It was asking him to be reborn. The criticism began to echo through the Valencia paddock like a cold draft slipping under a closed door, and at its center stood Neil Hodgson, speaking with the blunt certainty of someone unafraid to name uncomfortable truths. He declared, "Sitting here now, looking into the future, he signed for the wrong manufacturer," a phrase that struck with the precision of a scalpel rather than the sweep of an opinion. Toprak heard it later, replaying it in his mind like an unwanted refrain. Did I really choose a path already marked by doubt, he wondered, feeling the weight of each syllable tighten around him. Hodgson continued dismantling the optimism surrounding Yamaha by reminding everyone that Yamaha are in a little bit of turmoil, a statement that hung in the air like smoke refusing to clear. Engineers working on the bike confirmed what insiders whispered. The new V4 is not where it needs to be, especially in its mid-corner stability zone. Some technicians mentioned an obscure detail about inconsistent heat distribution across the front carbon discs that made modulation treacherous during long stints. The paddock listened, divided between those who believed in Toprak's adaptability and those who feared this gamble was too steep. Hodgson then delivered the knockout line. Top's key strength is the braking zone. If you do that with a Michelin front slick, it will lock and your face plant. A warning rooted not in pessimism, but in mechanical law. Toprak felt a chill hearing it, imagining the tire folding under pressure like a sheet of glass, fracturing beneath a misplaced step. The sun over Valencia dipped low, turning the circuit into a tapestry of long shadows and quiet tension. I cannot let these words define me, he told himself, though even he sensed the fragility in that vow. Team members tried to maintain composure, but their eyes betrayed their anxiety. Reporters scribbled notes with an urgency that suggested they sensed a storm brewing around Yamaha's newest hope. The corridors between garages became rivers of speculation, flowing toward one rider's debut. Toprak stood alone for a moment, feeling both exposed and strangely anchored. The mechanical noises behind him, whirs, clicks, hisses, felt like the pulse of a creature he must learn to tame. Each comment from the paddock sharpened the narrative surrounding him, forging a tension he could neither escape nor deny. And as the voices faded into the evening, one truth settled with chilling clarity. This wasn't criticism aimed at breaking him. It was physics pointing at the edge he now had to dance on. The expert criticism deepened when Silent Guintoli stepped forward with his signature calm brutality, stating, "Toprak faces a big challenge. Can he do what he is doing in World Superbike right now? I doubt it." A line that slid into the paddock like a blade made of pure analysis. Toprak heard it replayed on a journalist's recorder and felt something inside him tighten. Why does every compliment come dressed as a warning here, he thought, rubbing his palms together as if trying to warm courage that had suddenly turned cold. Engineers nearby discussed a lesser-known issue. Yamaha's V4 showed subtle fluctuations in corner entry load transfer, making Toprak's trademark dive bomb style mechanically incompatible. Carlo Pernat then added fuel to the unease, asking, "Are you letting him debut in a year when everything will change the following year?" And the paddock fell silent. His concern wasn't emotional. It was strategic, almost surgical. He warned that Toprak might acquire automatic skills that become useless when the switch to Pirelli tires and 850cc engines arrives in 2027. The irony was vicious. MotoGP was moving toward the very terrain Toprak already mastered. A mechanic whispered that the 2026 Michelin front behaved like a hypersensitive compass needle trembling at the slightest overload. Pernat's words painted Yamaha as a team gambling with timing rather than talent. Reporters scribbled furiously, sensing the tension swelling around a rider caught between eras. Am I training myself for a future that erases what I learned today? Toprak questioned, feeling the unease settle like dust inside his chest. The garage around him hummed with the metallic rhythm of tools, each click a reminder of the precision he needed but had not yet found. Guintoli's skepticism mixed with Pernat's prophecy, creating a storm neither personal nor unfair, just painfully logical. The paddock watched him with a mixture of hope and fear, like spectators observing a tightrope walker over an unseen drop. Toprak stepped toward his bike, its fairing reflecting his face stretched slightly, like a truth he didn't want to read. Data sheets rustled in the hands of technicians who knew that races were won not only on track but in the labyrinths of adaptation. Every voice around him seemed to ask the same question. Could he reshape himself fast enough? He inhaled sharply, letting the scent of fuel and ambition anchor him. And as he closed his eyes for a moment, the entire situation crystallized into one cold, undeniable realization. Yamaha hadn't just given him a challenge, they had given him a paradox. Carlo Pernat's final verdict drifted through the paddock with the heaviness of a curtain dropping, and his words cut with a precision that left no room for misinterpretation. "I see the only real drama at Yamaha." Mechanics paused when they heard it, as if the sentence had briefly altered the temperature inside the garage. Toprak absorbed the comment later, sitting alone with a bottle of water that suddenly tasted metallic. Am I stepping into a story already drowning? He wondered, feeling the uncertainty pulse in his jaw. Pernat's description of Fabio Quartararo as a prisoner at the factory haunted the hallways, portraying a champion waiting for a bike that refused to rise to his level. Engineers whispered about a little-known flaw in the V4 prototype: inconsistent rear-ride height responses under aggressive deployment, a problem that stretched development resources thin. The switch of Pramac from Ducati to Yamaha was described by insiders as bold, ambitious, and far from guaranteed, words that now felt like the prologue to a tragedy. In 2025, the very same Pramac went from title-contending brilliance to sinking from champions to last place, creating an instability that clung to the team like fog. Toprak walked through the garage, aware that these walls once held Ducati's confidence, but now held Yamaha's anxiety. "I didn't come here for comfort," he reminded himself, though the doubt gnawed quietly. Technicians monitored data screens that flickered like nervous hearts waiting for rhythm. Reporters drifted around the entrance, sensing the aroma of vulnerability mixed with burnt rubber and hope. Every conversation carried an undertone of urgency, as if the entire project was balancing on a thread stretched too thin. Toprak's boots echoed sharply on the concrete, each step reminding him he wasn't walking into a fortress, but a construction site. Yamaha's crisis didn't feel external. It felt structural, woven into every rushed upgrade and every defensive quote. The garage seemed to tighten around him when he approached his bike, its fairings reflecting a man entering a chapter without guarantees. A mechanic sighed as he calibrated sensors that refused to settle, whispering a prayer only he could hear. The air smelled of ambition struggling against time, the scent sharp enough to sting the throat. If this is the rebuild, Toprak thought, gripping his gloves, then I must become the foundation. Journalists watching him sensed both defiance and fragility, a balance as delicate as a candle flickering in a draft. And in that charged silence, one truth became painfully clear. He wasn't stepping into a factory, he was stepping into its resurrection, and resurrection never comes gently. The truth settled over Toprak like a slow, heavy fog as experts repeated the verdict none of them dared to soften. He must unlearn before he can learn, stripping away the instincts that made him a champion. They spoke clinically about his need to unlearn the Pirelli braking feel, a phrase that tasted foreign, even in his own thoughts. How do I erase the very reflex that made me who I am? He wondered, feeling a tremor of doubt slip beneath his calm surface. Engineers added that he must also unlearn the steel disc behavior, because carbon reacted like a nervous creature demanding constant reassurance. A technician explained a little-known detail about the Yamaha V4's sensitivity to rear squat thresholds, which made MotoGP's aggressive devices a world apart from WSBK's simpler choreography. They went on, insisting he unlearn the WSBK corner entry load, as if asking a pianist to forget how to move their fingers. The next list was no gentler: learn carbon braking modulation, learn Michelin pressure windows, learn MotoGP's aggressive ride height devices, learn the language of a bike that spoke in decimals instead of instincts. Toprak listened to each demand with a stillness that masked the chaos building inside him. It won't be easy to accept finishing outside the top 10, he admitted, voicing a fear that clung to him like cold breath on a mirror. The garage buzzed with calculations while his own mind rehearsed humility. I have to become lighter, softer, quieter, he told himself, feeling his pride tighten and then loosen like a muscle stretching past its limit. A mechanic described how the Michelin front acted like a fragile bridge that rewarded only the most patient touch. The scent of hot carbon drifted through the air, sharp enough to sting memory. Data sheets rustled as though the numbers themselves were whispering about the gap he must close. He paced slowly, noticing how every step echoed like a reminder that the ground beneath him wasn't familiar anymore. Outside, the Valencia light dimmed into a muted orange, painting his silhouette as if he were stepping into a different version of himself. The circuit felt larger, heavier, almost sentient in its expectations. If this year is a sacrifice, he thought, gripping his gloves with quiet resolve, then let it carve me into something new. The team watched him with a mix of worry and faith, their hopes balancing on the thin edge of adaptation. And as the evening wrapped itself around the paddock, one truth became unmistakable. 2026 would not crown him. It would test him, break him, reshape him. Because some seasons aren't meant to shine, but to sharpen. The long view of the paddock reveals a twist so sharp it feels almost scripted. Because in 2027, MotoGP switches to Pirelli tires, the very surface where Toprak carved his legend with impossible braking arcs and instincts honed like sculpture. Engineers murmur that this shift could flip the competitive order like a coin landing on its unexpected edge. Will the world finally see me on a machine that speaks my language again? He wonders, feeling a pulse of hope cut through the heaviness of 2026. Even Neil Hodgson, usually severe in his assessments, concedes he could surprise. He's a multiple champion who knows what it takes to win. A sentence that sounds less like prediction and more like a reluctant admission. The Yamaha garage brightens subtly whenever this possibility is mentioned, as if the future leaks a little light backward into the present. Manuel Puccetti, his longtime mentor, adds a deeper resonance by saying, he could be a very attractive prospect, capable of generating significant media attention worldwide, a statement spoken with the conviction of someone who has witnessed every stage of Toprak's evolution. Engineers whisper about a small technical detail. Pirelli fronts allow deeper carcass flex under peak load, meaning Toprak's stop and pivot style could re-emerge with a precision impossible on Michelin. The idea stirs something inside him, a spark rising from beneath weeks of adaptation fatigue. Puccetti goes further, believing Toprak could become the next face of MotoGP, a mantle heavy with history and expectation. The paddock feels this prophecy like static in the air, subtle but undeniable. I just need to endure the fire before I reach the shape meant for me, he thinks, aware that rebirth always begins with burning. Reporters frame the coming seasons as a two-act drama written in tire compounds. The garage smells of solder and heated rubber, each aroma hinting at futures both fragile and fierce. Mechanics work silently, knowing that 2026's suffering could become the very foundation of his 2027 resurgence. The Yamaha V4 prototype gleams under the lights, a creature still learning its own heartbeat. Toprak runs his hand over the fairing, imagining how differently it may respond once Pirelli meets carbon at the edge of physics. The notion of revenge, not petty but poetic, breathes quietly in the background. The paddock skeptics begin to hedge their doubts, sensing the symmetry of the coming shift. Let them wait, he tells himself, tightening his gloves with a calm born from deeper belief. And as he steps away from the bike, a single sentence crystallizes the entire arc awaiting him. 2026 will forge him, but 2027 will unleash him.